Hello, and welcome to the AusCannaPodcast, where we explore cannabis through the lens of patients, science, and the people shaping this space from the ground up. I'm your host, Christina McMullen. Today's episode is one of those conversations that doesn't sit neatly in a box, because the reality is when you're prescribed cannabis as a patient, you're often making decisions with very little to go on. A product name, maybe a COA if you're lucky, and a whole lot of trust. And even then, that still doesn't tell you how it's actually going to affect you. This conversation moves between lived experience, industry reality, and the kind of honesty you only get when people drop the polished answers. I'm joined by Colin Nuckolls, a Columbia University chemist working in molecular design, nanoscience, and organic chemistry, someone who's spent his career understanding how complex systems behave at a molecular level. I'm also joined by Alec Koudijs, who's worked across systems, strategy, and organizational development, focusing on turning complex ideas into something that actually works in the real world, especially in fast-moving, high-friction industries like cannabis. From the moment we hit record for this on-the-road episode, it was clear this wasn't going to be a scripted conversation. There's jet lag, there's blunt honesty, and there's a shared understanding that the Australian cannabis space is still finding its footing, while patients are navigating it in real time. We talk about why cannabis affects everybody differently, why delivery methods matter more than most people realize, and why something like an oil or an edible can feel completely inconsistent depending on who you are. And we also get into nanotechnology, what it is, how it works, and why it might be one of the most important shifts we see in terms of predictable, repeatable outcomes for patients. If you're looking for clean, simple answers, well, then this probably isn't the episode for you. But if you want to better understand what's actually going on beneath the surface, well, you're in the right place. Before we get into it, a friendly reminder to keep sending in your rapid-fire questions to AusCannaReviews@gmail.com, and to make sure you include your address so I know where to send your goodie bag when your question airs. All right, let's kick things off with the rapid-fire segment. All right, gentlemen, are you ready? We're going to dive right in to some rapid-fire questions. Alec.
Shoot the hostage.
No pressure. No hostage questions, I promise. What's
Yes.
Loft you a soft one to start. First thing you do when you arrive in a new city.
Check into my hotel, usually. And then I go for a walk and try to find the nearest park. Look for a good haven to enjoy myself.
Park, huh?
Yeah.
I like it.
I like to be discerning to the local neighbors.
I like it. Colin, what's the first thing you do when you arrive in a new city?
I don't go expose myself in the local park. That's what it sounds. It totally does sound like you're at the top trying to find a park and like smoke a joint. All right, so.
Woo! Okay, all right.
I'm in Australia. Oh.
Yeah. First thing I usually do, I don't know, get a taxi, hotel, check in, try to figure out where I'm supposed to be. 10 minutes from there, like that's just sort of. I usually don't have much time to think about it.
I like it. You guys are both very simple. You head straight to the hotel to check in.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I felt like it was a trick question.
Colin's been on the road for multiple weeks right now. I think he's been across 4 continents.
Staying in Dubai, Australia, back to Dubai.
That's why I figured it was a perfect, soft question to launch you guys. All right. Colin, last book you read that blew your mind?
Well, I guess I reread Dr. Adder recently, which is a really good book.
Why?
It's a post-apocalyptic book about a plastic surgeon. I mean, it's just, what could be better?
All right. Sounds like a certain niche. If you
Not very many of those.
no, that's okay though.
Yeah.
You know your niche.
Yeah.
Alec?
Well, I don't read too many books. I read mostly things online, but I guess the last book was Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I find really enjoyable to comb through.
Nice. Do you do audiobooks or you just don't do books at all?
I do audiobooks and I do books. I just have dyslexia and ADD, so that makes it a fun experience usually to get through the books. But the meditations is quite nice because I can just kind of plop around and find some wisdom.
I like it. I like it a lot, actually. All right, Colin. Most promising cannabinoid.
I think, probably the most promising ones are the ones that we haven't found yet. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many out there that are going to be so interesting. And, that's where the next 10 years are for cannabis research, I think, for sure.
I gotta agree. Sorry, Alec.
Yeah, Colin stole my answer there. I just knee-tapped him, but I said, no, I'm not going with that one. For me, just going off my ADD comment, THCV is a really interesting cannabinoid. And I think it's starting to get a lot of love, but I don't think that many people have actually consumed it in flower form with a significant potency. And Colin and I actually had the privilege to try Pink Boost Goddess from our friend Eric out in Humboldt, and that was testing around in the high teens of both THC and THCV, almost in a 1-to-1 ratio.
Oh.
And it was quite an interesting experience. I already have trouble keeping up with my mouth, and my mouth was far beyond my mind after that session. So that was a really cool one for me. THCV is a really interesting one too, because it's only different than THC by having a carbon tail that's 2 less. So just those 2 carbons are responsible for a totally different sensation.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like small little things like that, and all of a sudden, dramatically different experience for sure. Colin, something you're currently obsessed with learning.
Well, I guess the thing that we're sort of obsessed with right now is just trying to understand this relationship between what it is that the plant's producing and what it is that's actually arriving in a patient's brain. Because I think that's something where all the in-between pieces have just been sort of left out, and people are like, well, you saw the COA test, then that's what you got, and it's like, and that's just total nonsense. So that's one thing that we've been sort of obsessing over lately.
Colin's taking all my good answers here. Hold on to this mic here. I guess I'll go non-cannabis. I've been really, I'm really interested in consciousness, and I think it's an elusive concept that's really hard to nail down. But I had this interesting conversation with Claude the other night where we were diving into quantum physics a little bit and how that might be related to the nature of consciousness, and had this idea of maybe the universe collapsing these quantum wave functions as some sort of information gain that the universe experiences, and maybe that could be something to do with consciousness. But again, just riffing off the cuff here, very an interesting concept.
When you say Claude, I'm like, oh man, I am not applying ChatGPT to my world enough, because I ask simple things like, hey, I've got this, and this in my fridge. What should I make for dinner?
Well, that's a great question. I should probably try that one.
All right, so nope, we're not doing Colin, we're doing Alec. Ready?
Yes.
What's the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled? Ooh, I think we just Googled something earlier today, I think. Oh, okay. Today we were talking in the car, and Colin was Googling something. I said it's like going to the library these days. You got to go manually find the link and check it out and do some reading to find what you want. Whereas you go to any of these GDPs and they serve it up pretty interesting, and they got their own links, so you can kind of dive in from there. So I honestly, my days of Googling are far and few in between. I used to be a big Googler, so that's probably the most honest answer.
That is an honest answer.
The last thing I had Claude do is put together a 100-page document on how to navigate the Australian regulatory system.
All right, Colin, what was the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled, oh yeah, well, we were, so my wife and daughter are here, and we were looking for a place to go to dinner tonight. So we looked, so that's we kind of lame, but like, that is what we did.
All right. So, last question, listener submitted question. This comes from Anthony in Airlie Beach, Queensland. If you had to convince an alien that cannabis is a good idea, what's your pitch, Alec?
Well, I'll take you right up to outer space with them pretty quick. But I think the most interesting thing about cannabis, and this expands to all psychedelics, is that the concept of neuroplasticity. And I think that if I was to get abducted by aliens, the first thing I might need is a cannabis therapy to help me with that experience. So I hope that they understand it. But more than that, I think that cannabis is really an interesting concept because we're talking about over 2,000 bioactive compounds just in the plant alone. So sometimes I do have the thought that maybe cannabis was a gift from the aliens because it is quite unique. But that's my thoughts on the aliens there.
I guess I would probably try to talk to them a little bit about giving a monkey like a typewriter and tell them you wanted to come up with a Shakespeare play and get them to understand that concept. And then once they did, I'd say, well, that's what cannabis is, right? You just somehow, through just dumb luck and evolution and God knows what, like nature gave us this plant that makes, thousands of active compounds, and a lot of people have tried it throughout history. And like, give me a break. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense that it exists. That would be my pitch for the aliens. But
I'm with you. It is a little weird that it exists when you stop to think about it.
It's probably why they're visiting.
You think?
Yeah, they're coming for, yeah, from the get-go.
Oh, so you think maybe they planted it, was like, okay, humans, you do what you do.
Then they watched how legalization rolled out, and they're like, oh yeah, these guys do not fucking deserve it.
Yeah, no. Send in the regulators. No, we love you, regulators. You're making the dream possible.
Making the dream possible, yeah. Over the dream. Oh, gentlemen, thank you so much for playing rapid fire questions with me. I greatly appreciate it. Before we get started and dive into things, I just want to give a quick little shout out to Tom Forrest. Thank you very much to him for facilitating this meeting, this connection, to making this podcast on the road happen. Gentlemen, let's start off, I guess. Well, I do want to start off with why you're here in Australia.
So we're here in Australia to escape our federal government, I think.
Well, I don't know what coming to Australia was the place, because our federal government is cracking some whips there.
They are, but they're at least cracking some whips. Our government is AFK on the matter, so we're kind of just SOL there. But our kind of initial thesis was we, as Colin was mentioning, we wanted to map the inputs of, hey, this is what's in your flower in an in-depth way, to this is what's actually being consumed by your body, and then take that data set and be able to get users and consumers or patients to give feedback on their experiences to really create a heat map for us to start surveying this massive landscape of compounds. And along that journey, we fell into this nanotechnology, and in the States, there's a lot of technologies that maybe aren't exactly what they claim to be. But when you think about it, coming up with a delivery method that can be consumed by everyone, that impacts you in a matter of minutes, and kind of, I don't know if guarantees is a strong word, but allows for the direct mapping of inputs from the plant material into the inputs into your bloodstream. And that's a really powerful tool for our mission and what we're trying to accomplish. So we've come here to talk to some folks and share what we understand in the hopes that we can maybe set up some clinical trials or meaningful research here with a functioning government to really crack the code on what's going on with these plants.
I love it. I definitely do want to talk about delivery systems, and I definitely do want to get into various different, like you were saying, how various different cannabinoids and how you digest them and whatnot. But first, I want to start with something simple with THC, because that's something that we all kind of understand. It's one of the, I guess, metrics that we've started to use in the industry. And I guess my first question for you gentlemen would be, how do you think we ended up with THC being this metric? Do you think it was a regulatory thing? Do you think it was a science thing? Or do you think that's just kind of like the best we got?
I don't guess I really know the answer to that, right? Maybe it's not answerable, but so I guess, I mean, this is just a guess, but whenever it was in the 50s or 60s when they discovered that it was THC that was in the cannabis plant, minus with all the decarboxylation stuff. I mean, I guess at that point, it was the major component in there, and then it was kind of an easy thing, go track it down, crystallize it, get the structure, and then they've said, okay. And I think and this is something that kind of blew my mind the first time I took an LCMS trace of cannabis, was I was expecting to see like THC and nothing else. That's what the plant makes, right? And I was just dummy. I didn't know anything. And then you just see it's just this circus, this sea of just all this other stuff. And, so I guess how we ended up there is like, it's probably the right move. It's the main component. It's psychoactive. It's kind of the business end of the plant at that point. And so that's what everyone went after. And then through time, I think it just got to be reduced to the plant being that. And it's like and then you start wondering, well, is it, then saffron, is it just saffrol, or is there something else in there that also like helps it along the way and all this other stuff? So who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very fair. And the only inkling I have is that was kind of the initial research. So if you're a regulator, you look at academia and you look at the research and you say, hey, we have this plant that we don't want on the streets anymore, and this is the chemical component that is majorly in there, so we're going to regulate that now. And unfortunately, I think that's where it stopped for a really long time.
What would be a really interesting hypothesis. So I'm not saying this is true, but if there was a bunch of cannabis that was grown in one part of the world that didn't have THC as the main component, and there was a bunch in another part of the world that had another one, and then it just turns out that there was these ones that had THC, and then that sort of proliferated and then got crossed with a bunch of other plants, and so THC kind of became the thing. And then anyone who brought anything else from those other regions in here was like, well, we don't want that because it doesn't have THC, but it might be that whatever it had was even better, right? So all those unusual strain or cultivars should be like looked at and should be like, what's in those things and try to figure it out, because it may not be that THC is the be all end all in every strain of cannabis, like that example of the pink boost goddess, where they bred it to be, THCV was dominant or equal with THC, so.
No, I agree. I tell patients and clinicians conversations all the time, THC is not the be all end all. You should be looking for other things. There are hundreds of compounds in the plant, and you should definitely try to figure out beyond THC what your system is agreeing with.
100%. And that's one of the main issues that I think faces the US market, is that the consumer base is so focused on this THC percentage. So much so where I was just visiting dispensaries across California, and there was one where this gentleman was saying, hey, I was with a farmer, and he has sun-grown cannabis. He's like, I love sun-grown cannabis, but none of the kids that are coming to my store, they're not kids, they're young adults, obviously, but in their 20s. None of them are interested in anything that's below 30%. So much so that now my top selling flower is some riffraff cannabis covered in THCA isolate crystals. And that gets to tack up to 40-50%. And those eighths go for, $50 to $60. And that's kind of what's keeping those stores alive, unfortunately. And it's just a lack of this understanding coming from, the people like Colin who we trust as society to be educating us, and they've been handcuffed, so it's really just been this narrow focus. And I think it's a pretty sad state of affairs when there's so much more that we could be exploring, as an industry.
Yeah, well put. I agree.
I was going to say, I completely agree with that. Let's talk about the entourage effect, because we are talking about how different things in the plant all kind of come together and create the overall experience. For listeners that don't know anything about the entourage effect, do you guys mind explaining kind of briefly where it kind of originated and what the concept of the entourage effect is?
I don't know. I don't know exactly where it originated, but I could guess where it originated for me in the sense that I consume one cultivar to another, and I have a completely different experience. And then, funny enough, actually, when cannabis first legalized in Massachusetts, there was a bunch of distillate vape pens that came on the market. And you look at the testing of those, and I don't know if the testing was dialed in or not, but they're in the high 90s of THC. And when COVID hit, they actually, there was a whole vape crisis that hit the U.S. at the same time. So I'm not really sure what ended up being the issue, what was the exact issue with that crisis. But what happened was they pulled vapes off the market. And for someone like myself, I still had my cartridges, and they were selling refills, but these refills were just straight THC distillate. And when I consumed that, I missed out on a lot of the experience. It was a very short, brief, kind of little bit of energetic kind of focus, but nothing really cerebral or euphoric or sedative about it at all. And that's when it really clicked for me of like, wow, this is a fraction of what's really going on in the plant. And that's how I conceptualize live the entourage effect. And it goes back to what Colin and I are talking about as we see, the COA testing, and then some COA testing for two cultivars might be relatively similar, but they can have totally different sensations when you consume them. So that kind of just expanded that it was much more than what was on the COA for me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I guess maybe we should have talked before just to make sure we didn't have exactly the same stories, but it was kind of the same thing that I found that in New York at that time, all you could buy was like stuff from California that was like indoor flower, and found a place to buy the absolute best of the best and all that, and got it. And just found like the more money you spent on it, the worse it got, because it was like this, and it was the same thing. It just gave me like anxiety, and I was like, I seem to remember this being enjoyable, and I just was like, and so then I just went on this quest to go to California and find sun-grown cannabis, which is how I ended up meeting all those people out in Humboldt County. So, but yeah, so I guess that was, at a more sort of right down the middle answer is, the entourage effect is just that, is like something that on the one hand is like, really kind of mind-blowing and interesting in the way that we just said it. But on the other hand, it's also just like ridiculously simple, right? That it's like, and it's also obvious, right? You got, more is going to do more, and there's more in it than just THC. And so you see all these effects, so it's not, it's not magic, I don't think, but it's kind of makes sense, but it's a really great insight.
Yeah, and I'm remembering a little bit more. I think that Ethan Rousseau's research was paramount in the sense of like we had these CB1 and CB2 receptors, and this understanding that, hey, maybe these cannabinoids are binding together on this receptor and causing a different reaction than before. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but Colin and I've been a part of some really interesting neuron studies where we've actually blocked CB1 and CB2 receptors in the neurons, and a certain classification of cannabinoids, quinones, are still heavily toxic in these very large concentrations, which is showing that they're affecting these cells through a different receptor or pathway, which in itself is going almost beyond the entourage effect because, from what I just explained, I think a lot of people might think of the entourage effect just happening at these CB1 and CB2 sites, but it's actually happening across the cells.
And there's a lot of other ways you could think about it, the entourage effect working, where you could have, if you just looked at like sort of, I guess, binding affinity to a particular receptor or something like that, then you might not understand that even these minor ones may have an outsized effect. They could be synergistic. They could have a much higher affinity for some other place in neurons and things like that. So I think it's something that is kind of mind-blowing to think about and also really, really intensely difficult to figure out on any level, like what it is. I mean, when I was first reading those papers, there was this debate of whether like the entourage effect was like real. And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously it's real. It's like someone tells you this painting is blue. It's like, yeah, blue. I'm going to argue with that, but there's some, but I think the devil's in the details, right? That's what we don't know.
And I think that's what our quest is right now. Actually, that's the pretty much the exact quest, is trying to articulate and classify and build a foundation for researchers to then be able to go out and say, hey, I have this in-depth chemical data. I now have, in vitro studies, and now I can do what I'm an expert at in looking at these compounds on the cells that I'm familiar.
Yeah, and this ought to be, and this should be like, this is the time to do this research, right? Like, because when THC was first discovered, they did it by isolating it and crystallizing it and then figuring out what the structure is and all that. And that's a lot of work. And nowadays you can do all this stuff with these really fancy analytical instruments where you can get, really rapid profiling of things. And then also with all the, ways of analyzing data and stuff that are coming out, and you look at this as like a big numbers problem, right? I've got 2,000 active components or something like that interacting with how many different receptors and this many different, phenotypes of human beings. Like those are big changes and big interesting things that big data will be good at.
And then you light them on fire and the space gets exponentially bigger.
I like how you guys both explained it slightly differently, but came back to the same core concept. So on my Substack, which is AusCanna Reviews, I actually just hit this incredible milestone where I have now given notes on 100 different flowers. So 100 different cultivars. This has taken me 3.5 years to slowly pull together. This is not something I just did overnight. Anyways, I have this whole system where I break the flowers apart and I smell them and I this and I that and I write all these notes and blah, blah, blah. Well, I have this leaf infographic, and this leaf infographic I color. And that's kind of my visualization as to what the effects were for each of these flowers. Anyways, long story short with it, I didn't realize it until I was pulling together this index, which is essentially just links back to all of these flower notes. Every single flower has a different effects leaf. Every single one of them. Not a single, no two are alike. And I never noticed that until literally like just a couple of weeks ago when I pulled this together. And so for me, for the first time, looking at this visualization, I was like, holy shit, this to me is a visualization of the entourage effect, because every one of those flowers is different. Every one of them has a different COA. Every one of them has a different terpene profile. Every one of them has a different cannabinoid profile. And every single one of them was slightly different.
I'm getting kind of chills when you're saying that, because it's, that's taking the foundation that we're trying to build here. That's our ultimate goal, is to try to be able to build a foundation for each person to be able to carve that out for themselves. And now, as Colin's saying, with the advances in technology, how cool would it be if you could just talk to a GDP and, scan your QR code and be like, hey, like, this is how I'm feeling. And it would have an engaging conversation with you, and then log that to a dashboard where you could be like, hey, I'm looking for this goal today. What should I be looking for on my tests?
Which is so bizarre, because when I stopped to think about it, so way back in the day, my first experience with cannabis was brickweed, Mexican dirt. I was living in San Antonio, so South Texas. wonderful brickweed at 14, 15 years old in the 90s. Didn't know any better. Woo, loved it. Then I moved to Vancouver and was like, holy shit, how is this the same plant? Like, there's no way this is the same plant. And so for me at a very early age, I guess I was just like, wow, there's so much going on here, that there's so much to be explored, and how could it possibly be the same thing?
What you were saying about the leaves and these different, you looked at them, they're all different or whatever. And so imagine then if I mean, that's really interesting if you could correlate all those different colored leaves with then all of what's actually in the plant. And you actually knew, like, what's the overlap between, I want to get to this little thing where I have this green segment on my leaf, how do I get back there? And at least if you had that other half of the data, you could do it. So this is what's so like funny is, like, all the time you go out, people say, oh, well, I've got this thing I'm using AI to make this thing that's going to tell me what kind of like cannabis you should go buy at the dispensary. And you're like, okay, well, how does it work? And it's like, oh, they go and they say exactly this, that you'll get patient feedback. And that's sure. Everyone can like take some cannabis and tell them how it feels. It's all, you're going to get a big database of stuff. This one's happy, this one's sad, or whatever. And they're like, okay, but how are you going to connect it to the chemistry there? Well, we got the COAs. Like, we don't need anything else. It's all right there. And you're just like, oh, how many tens of millions of dollars have been invested in this company? I mean, it's insane, right? I mean, like, it's just crazy.
I think it's all about the approach, right? And I think, like I was saying, like back in the day when I was younger in Texas with Mexican dirt, I didn't know any better. It was giggles, it was laugh, it was a good time. But when I got to Vancouver, I got introduced to somebody who was boutique bud before we even knew what the hell boutique bud was. And like, I'd go to see this guy, and his conversation would literally be like, so Christina, what are you doing today? What are your plans today? What do you want to achieve? And on some level, that sounds hippy dippy. It's all fucking get out. But 20-something me was like, okay, well, I think I want to do this today, and I want to do that today. And this guy literally was like, he would pull out different things from underneath the couch, like different bulk bins, and he'd be like, oh, you want to be productive today? Well, okay, you need some of this over here. Oh, okay, you're going out with friends. You need some. And yes, it was about strain names, cultivar names, but it was really, with him, it was really about, well, how do we craft the experience? Well, what are you doing? What do you want to get out of this? And so I think, like I said, to be exposed from brickweed to all of a sudden, a plant that looks dramatically different, to some dude who's like, oh, grasshopper, come here and let me teach you. I think for me, it was like this, whoa, cannabis is so much more than what we're saying it is on the surface.
And I mean, I think that's the backbone of what holds the culture together, is you have these stewards who are decades educated on this subject and the product, and they're able to articulate what they have scientifically found through their own experiences and the experiences of others to you. But we kind of are in this world now where we have what you could refer to as the bro science has to meet with, the academic science. And just going back to Colin's point on the COA, I think this is the point's bigger than even the data concept there, in the sense of, one, if you're doing a data analysis, you have to understand what is the nature of my data? Where does my data come from? Colin's laughing, but the point that I'll raise here is, in Massachusetts, as a cultivator, we are actually tasked with sending our sample to the lab for certificate of analysis. In New York, they have to have the packages in final form, and they'll send a picker, which makes a lot more sense to me. But there was a huge issue with testing fraud and people over drying their flower samples to change these numbers, and 1 gram is representative of 15 pounds. So you then apply, oh, I'm gonna take this COA and map people's effects on it. Okay. Yes, that is the goal, but we need better data to do that properly. And more so, the even not scarier thing, but the crazier thing to me is that in Massachusetts, you have medical practitioners that are going to tell people, hey, go look for THCV, go look for CBD. You need some sleep, look for CBN maybe. They're going to go to these COAs and make their purchasing decisions off of these COAs. And the validity of these COAs is in question, then their literal medical therapies in question. So I think that the concept of testing, and this is not to the regulators, but it's to the medical professionals and the consumers to understand what's actually in your cannabis, is unfortunately on your shoulders, because we as an academic and scientific community are just at the beginning. And that's a whole nother discussion of why we're only starting now. I agree, now is the time, but maybe in the last 40 years of prohibition could have been a little bit of the time too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the COA testing, the way it's done now, is like one of those WPA projects during the Great Depression, just to like give people a job so they can go like generate random numbers or something, because that is exactly what they're doing. And it's, I think, sure, have them test for heavy metals and poisons and pesticides and all the other stuff that's nefarious. But whenever anyone decided they were going to try to profile what was in the plant, it'd be one thing if they just said, okay, we're just going to look at the THC level. Fine. But then they just decided, okay, we're not only going to do that, we're going to pick these other 7 random things, and we're going to test those and not a bunch of other stuff. And so then then we're going to do such an antiquated test that it's not really going to be all that relevant anyway. And we're not really going to be that sure of the results. And on top of that, we're going to set it up to be a system that's just rife for corruption. Just, anybody you talk to who grows cannabis just says like they know how to get, the number has to be 30. They'll find a way to get to 30, And so like, what are we doing? And then people are literally relying on that data to like say they're going to go do something with profiling the plant. We're going to make a phytofax. We're going to like set up a color wheel and tell you like from our phytofax that we got for COA what any of this means. And it's like, it's just nonsense. I mean, really.
I'm with you. I mean, it's tough, right? Like, especially here in Australia, it's a medical market. I mean, I can't walk into a dispensary and start picking up jars, start looking at bud. I mean, I think
You can't in the States either.
you can't go into. You mean
Yeah, state to state. Yeah.
A dispensary I've been into recently, you couldn't just, they'll show you some like canned thing that was like something they have like one thing in a jar and it doesn't smell like anything any of it. It's been sitting around there for a long time. Sorry.
Sorry, only 2 mics here. Casual. Somebody wants to sponsor the podcast. I need a 3rd mic. Shout outs, anybody. I mean,
Tony, we're looking at you. That is the calling question.
it is though. It's tough in the sense that, like, as a patient, all I really have to go on is a COA if it's provided, some genetics if it's provided, and that's sweet fuck all when you stop to think about it. But that's all I get to make the decision.
Well,
What genetics do you get? What?
So like I'll get like a cultivar name, right? And then sometimes
A goofy name somebody made up.
yeah, sometimes yeah, fair, but sometimes they'll also tell you, hey, this is
Cross of 2 other goofy names that are totally made up.
This comes to
I know you're killing me here. You're killing me, Colin. We're on the same team, Warren. Jeez.
I was thinking it was actually cool if they gave like the genetics. I was
Like, again, we're on surface genetics, or what they're claiming to be genetics, right? Like, again, it's blind trust on my half as a patient that this is what the manufacturer, what the grower, what the sponsor, whoever it is behind the product, is providing correct information to me.
and I think that's where the trust becomes super important in this industry, right? And that goes back to the stewards of the culture, right? We trust those folks because the experiences that they're communicating to us or helping us get to our goals, we arrive there. And that builds that trust kind of line. And that's why I think it's really important to understand who you're getting your cannabis from, understanding where it came from, the farmers, because it is very easy in the States and metric to call something a new name. And that happens all the time. People are like, oh, I need some sour diesel. This smells lemony. And now it's sour diesel. And I'm not saying that, of course, I'm not making a claim that this is everyone, but it does happen. And the interest of the regulators and folks like that, I think, should be, again, trying to get less away from, we should, you can understand the level of your cannabinoids. I think that's good. But I think that there's an over index to the COA and to the significance of that when people are purchasing it, both as, B2B and B2C. And really, they should be thinking about what the people who have already consumed that are telling them, because that's probably the best reference point, even though cannabis affects us all differently. To me, that speaks way more than a COA.
Let's talk about how cannabis affects everybody differently, because I feel like that's an excellent segue into delivery systems. So let's talk flower, let's talk oil, let's talk traditional edibles, and let's talk my favorite, nanotechnology. Everybody experiences cannabis different, right? So let's start very basic with flower. When we have flower, what happens when we inhale it? When we're talking to, without getting super complicated,
How did you get it in an inhalable form is the first question, as I think, because there's both combustion and vaporization points.
We're gonna not combust because we're medical patients and we don't do that.
Right.
So we're gonna do, again, general terms, vaporization. Okay.
And maybe we'll talk real quick of why that's a wise thing to do in a medical sense, because
I'd love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what we were talking about before, you have over 2,000 bioactive compounds in the cannabis plant. If you were to combust those, you are generating a random number generator of exponentially more compounds in a somewhat uncontrollable fashion. When you vaporize, hitting these different temperatures, as medical patients are hopefully well informed, you can target different compounds. And that allows for a little bit more of a controlled release of what you're looking for. That being said, to get something like CBN, you might need to get it pretty hot. And when that happens, there might be other things going on too. And again, it might not be as vast as the people call it like the pyrocannabinoid space of combustion, but there is, I think, a much larger space than what's on the COA, or definitely what's on the COA, as we already talked about. But even if you had the full spectrum analytical test, the space is larger. So that kind of presents a challenge to medical practitioners of saying, hey, I have this in vitro study of these compounds that I now want you to ingest. So I'm going to give you some target temperature. And what's actually coming out of that vaporizer could be is in large portion what we're looking for, but these nuanced, smaller, minor cannabinoids may have outsized effects because of their binding affinity, because of which receptors they're hitting. So I think that if you're really trying to get the specific compounds, vaporizing flower may not be the best bet. But then what's your alternative? An edible? And an edible challenge has its own unique challenges with, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but with the first pass metabolite becoming very, very sedative. And it's probably happening to other cannabinoids too. And that is, again, maybe not what we were looking for from some in vitro study or from whatever the medical literature might be regarding the specific goal. So I think that the traditional forms, while they're providing therapy and people are finding relief, the notion that I'm consuming exactly what's in the plant is an illusion, because you're consuming more than what's in the plant and different than what's in the plant, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We just don't have that mapping really well documented yet.
Yeah, and I guess if we're talking about how it's different for everybody, then also all those different settings on all those different vapes are different, and everybody themselves is different, and and then you look at how their metabolism system is going to be different, and what's going to come out of that. It's just like, oi, what a mess, I mean, it is taking something that's complex and making it really complex by heating things really hot in the presence of oxygen and doing all these other things. You might actually wonder how much THC have people actually been putting into their body, and that might be the cruel joke, right? That the plant wasn't actually making THC, and you really weren't getting all that much of it into your body anyway, but it became important along the way.
Yeah. And I don't want to, make it seem like, this is, a complex medical therapy. There's all these nuances and that's a bad thing. I mean, this is a great thing. It's unlocking a new frontier in how we look at health and wellness and our bodies. And one of the coolest things that has been a good explanation, I think, for some folks I've talked to is the peptides. So peptides are becoming a really popular thing in the States. And now we've got people buying peptides online and injecting themselves with an unregulated substance. So, I don't know. But if you think about what's going on, these peptides are really small molecules and they're hitting receptors on cells. And that's then causing a whole flurry of reactions to then occur, which are tied to the goal of that peptide treatment. You could hopefully find the same with these cannabinoids, right? If we can start to really understand the science and peel back this comb through the mess, or just the variety, we can hopefully get to a place where we can start to target these things better, and that leads us to okay, now that we have something, let's say, that we are very sure is the right target, how do we get it into the human body? And that's a challenge that pharmacology has been dealing with for quite a long time. But we have some really cool new technologies, as you mentioned, with nano emulsification. And I don't know if we want to get into that.
I was going to say, just before we get into nano, let's so flower in general is something that is what's the word I'm searching for? Patients feel the effects of, right? Usually you have a couple of pulls on your vaporizer and within a few minutes, you could start to feel effects from whatever it is. It does matter what temperature you're at, but it's almost an instantaneous thing. You get an instantaneous kind of feedback kind of loop with it. Oils are different, right? Oils onset can be dramatically different, and that's something to do with bioavailability and how different people process different things. So before we get into nano emulsions, let's touch on what oils are and how oils are absorbed into the body. So when we're talking about oils, why do patients sometimes have dramatically different effects with oils? Why is it not a repeatable outcome?
So I don't think there's not much. I don't believe the data shows that there's actually much skin penetration in your mouth. So really what you're doing is you're just ingesting the cannabis. It's just like any edible. Then it gets into your gut, gets emulsified in your gut, goes to your liver, and then your liver does what your liver does, and it gets oxidized. And that means that the THC that actually then 45 minutes to an hour later that actually reaches your brain is not THC anymore. It's all been converted into something else, a hydroxylated form of it. And that's the so-called first pass metabolite.
Do you feel that the onset when you do an oil is quick? What would
for me
for you personally, what would you say?
Personally,
yeah,
oils are a total waste of my time.
Okay.
Other than an upset stomach and trips to the bathroom because I've had too much MCT oil, right? Yeah. It's just.
I did see on the Americans, and I didn't know if this was true or not, though, that they would drink a shot of oil just so they could go out and drink all night. Do you think that works?
That it coats?
Yeah, that was what because all the Americans, and they were talking about this was like a Russian thing that every Russian spy knew, that you would just drink a thing. So,
like a shot of olive oil?
Yeah.
You know what? I've heard of that before.
But Yeah. And I've had the edible olive oils before. I think they're super fun and great, but I think that's going towards more of a traditional edible in the sense of where it's going and how it's being processed.
But they tell you when you get your oil, you get your C100 oil. And okay, so it's supposed to have 100 milligrams of CBD in your 1 milliliter of MCT oil. You're supposed to put it underneath your tongue. You're supposed to hold it underneath your tongue for some ungodly amount of time, 30 seconds, 3 minutes. I know some people that are crazy. They're like, oh, I hold it for 10 minutes. And I'm like, you're smoking crack, but whatever. And then you eventually swallow it, right? But in theory, you're absorbing it
Through the mucous membrane.
through your mucous membrane, right? So that's the theory with oils. And like I said, for me personally, they are a total waste of time. However, I talk to some patients who love them. They're consistent. They get wonderful effects from them, and I am secretly jealous.
Yeah. That's the unique thing, right? We're all a little different. And there's people, we're talking about edibles now. I have people who I've given them a lot of edibles and they're like, I don't feel anything. And they're not cannabis folks, so it's not like a tolerance issue. I just think that some folks have different processes.
So I was going to say, transitioning into traditional edibles, right? Again, why do you guys think that somebody can have a 10 milligram gummy and go to the moon, and then somebody like me can sit down with a bag of 10 milligram gummies and just eat them like they're an ant and not blink?
Yep. I think, again, there's so many things that are at play, right? So we're dealing with very small molecules that are engaging on our cells, and all of our cells are very different from one another. And I think that just that alone is a big thing. Then you add in the concept of tolerances or just even your current mood or tiredness can affect you, I think, dramatically there. But the biggest thing that it boils down to me for edibles, and I think this might be why people choose to vaporize, is that the sensation's totally different. I really find it to be a heavily sedative experience. Now I can have a gummy and go have fun, but if I'm gonna eat a bag of gummies, it's not gonna be the same as if I'm enjoying my volcano, So it's a very different experience, and it just highlights the difference in chemistry that's going on with these different pathways.
Do you find that edibles are slightly hallucinogenic for you?
I find that there are certain edibles that affect me differently, but I would say that they are more sedative in the sense that my eyes get heavy, and I don't find them that euphoric, to be honest. I find them as like a body maybe euphoria, but I'm an ADD sativa lover, so I'm looking for that mental therapy.
I love it, Colin. Do you find edibles slightly hallucinogenic?
No, not at all. I only take a 10 milligram gummy when I'm on a red eye flight, and I just go I take it when I sit down on the plane. By the time the plane takes off, just like Alec said, my eyes are heavy and I just fall right to sleep. I sleep for 7 hours. That's the only time. It's the only time I ever take. I have no use for them at all. It's like,
And this is another thing that I find with edibles is the grogginess.
Yeah.
And I think that this speaks to a concept that we're talking about a lot with these more oxidized cannabinoids, and that there might be something to the effect that these oxidized cannabinoids could be responsible for that groggy sensation. If you think about going back, Colin didn't get to share his story from childhood, so now I'm going to do him justice. But I asked Colin many years ago, so what got you interested in figuring out all this stuff with cannabis? And he said, well, when I was a kid, I had my cannabis in my bag, and when I got it right away, it was really good. And then 6 months later, it was not the same. And I just don't know what happened to it. Yeah. So, but I think that we know now what's happening is the cannabis is being oxidized. There's going to be a lot more CBN and things like that. And I think if anyone pulls out some old cannabis and they consume it. My experience is that it's heavily sedative, and I'm like, wow, that hit me different. But I am really just sedated right now, and then after it I feel like I might be robbed of my energy a little bit. And I find that for me, what I'm looking for from cannabis is to not do that. And I think that's one of the most important things when people are consuming cannabis to ask themselves is, again, what is your goal? If your goal is to go to sleep, then that might be exactly what you're looking for. So, go open up all your weed bags and it will take good care of you. But for me, I'm looking to put a pep in my step and help me focus and get through the day.
Yeah, I had an Instagram account that got hacked. It's just gone now. But I was like Alec. I was like, man, I have no use for CBN. Like, I just have no interest in it at all. I don't want to go unless I want to go to sleep on a red-eye flight, right? And so I posted all this stuff about CBN thinking, because to me, it was the enemy, right? We have to keep it pure. We have to not let it be oxidized. It's not something that the plant makes. I was really a purist about it, but it was all just because it was what I liked, right? And I just got all these haters just being like, how could you say that? This is the only thing that lets me sleep. And it was like they're everything. And then I was like, yeah, they're kind of right. Like, I shouldn't really harsh on this. It's working for people, but it's just, the gummies are just not my thing,
And that's what it goes back to. Really, it's a personal goal, and I think that's what's so magical about the plant is because of this variety of compounds, it's helping millions of people with vastly different goals.
It just doesn't suppose on social media that everyone thinks exactly the same way as you, as me.
Which we're not doing right now at all. Right. We haven't done that at all, this podcast.
I mean, look, you guys saw my face when you were talking about how you take a gummy and it's like sleepy days. And I'm like, no, man. I was like hallucinogenic. And you guys were like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. My edible experience is vastly different than your edible experience. But I think part of that is I need so much of it because I do suffer from the first pass effects. So for me, I don't lack the enzyme. It's the opposite. My enzymes are just too bloody good at their job. And it's not just a one-off with THC. This is something that's been reoccurring in my life as far as, when I was younger, I was put on a whole bunch of heavy-duty antibiotics because I kept getting strep throat. Anyways, long story short with it, they were finally like, yeah, your tonsils need to come out. Heavy-duty antibiotics for 6 weeks leading up to it. I went in for my tonsillectomy, and my tonsils were still infected, and the ENT was like, I have no idea how this is possible. So for me, it is a reoccurring thing, which is why nano-emulsions were such, and I don't know if I can, I'm going to say it, they were such a game changer for me, because now all of a sudden, my cannabinoids are now being absorbed dramatically quicker in the upper GI tract. They're not being converted. I'm actually getting those cannabinoids, right? So let's talk nanotechnology. Why does it work?
I guess it's kind of magic, right? So it's because if you take surfactants or soap molecules and you put them into water, right, they can dissolve a lot of greasy stuff, right? Cannabinoids are pretty greasy molecules. And so the way they keep all the grease from coming in contact with the water is they make these liposomes and micelles and other things that encapsulate all the greasy stuff. And then if you put it under high pressure, it turns them all into these small little nano capsules that just contain the greasy stuff, the cannabinoids. And then once they get small enough, I still find this amazing though, when they get small enough, then when you put them into water, they don't absorb visible light because they're so small. So the solutions that they're in look more or less clear, a little bit opalescent. And then it'll also absorb through your skin, absorb through your cheek cells and your mouth. And so it's kind of amazing, because then once that happens, it gets into your bloodstream and then into your brain, and then it's released. But I think it's that last part where I said, like, it gets into your bloodstream and then, magic happens. It's in your brain. But I kind of am interested in that process, but I don't know how to even approach the problem about how that whole process works and what it would be like to actually have something that's sort of released on cue, where it got to some cell that was at a different pH and then it broke apart or something like that. It'd be even better. I mean, but something like that. But
I think we can get there. Like, we have, I know in the States we've got, what is it, the rapid onset, like Tylenols and stuff, where they dissolve faster, so they kick in faster. But then there's also like a slow release with it. Could we do that with nanotechnology for cannabinoids?
oh, but I think that's what the pharmaceutical industry's done for many, many, many things, right? So I think, yes, I don't think there's any problem with doing that as long as you're sort of following the strategy, because things kind of fall into different categories, whether they're more lipophilic or more hydrophilic. And if you try to put the square peg in the round hole, it doesn't work. But for lipophilic drugs, that's what they do, is they make these types of nano emulsions, and people write books about this. It's just come into cannabis recently, and so everyone's decided they're a nano emulsifier now. So
I was going to say, well, let's start talking about the differences in nanos, because you were saying a good nano in a glass of water, it's not going to reflect light. It's clear or cloudy, maybe, right? So why is it like that? How do you know when you have it?
It's transparent, and that's in the States. What we'll see suspended solids in what I would say is low quality nano emulsifications. And all I'm saying by low quality is, I mean, what we're talking about here, for it to be going into the mucous membrane, you need to be around 70 nanometers or less. Definitely less than 100 nanometers to have a really good bioavailability opportunity there. So if you're sitting at 150, 200 nanometers, that's not going to pierce that mucous membrane. And what you're going to have is it's going to go into your biotrack, and maybe some of it, goes in, but you're still going to have a lot of it going through that liver and basically being oxidized and leading to a different compound entering your bloodstream. So I think that the most important thing for people to understand with their nano emulsifications is, what is your goal? And if your goal is to have a faster onset, then you can be maybe a little bit larger on the particle size. But if you're really trying to get it right into that bloodstream, you really want to be sub 100, I think.
Yeah. And I think if you want to, sell products, you want to say that it's nano. And I don't mean this like we shouldn't have someone regulate this, but it seems like it's kind of the job of the person selling it to say, hey, here's some light scattering that shows that this stuff has this average diameter of particle. And then also show some studies that show that it's like stable over time, right?
And I think that's what's really great, and why we're here, is that Australia, the EU, they have GMP standards at play for cannabis. In the States, we don't, that's not a thing, as far as a requirement. And so there's just a lot. And then we also had the whole hemp showdown. So we've just been through a lot with this plant. And I think that it's just been taken advantage of, quite frankly. And what I'm really happy about is that now we're being able to talk with someone like yourself that's a champion of nanotechnologies and really just explain, hey, this is what you're looking for. You need a small particle size that's going to be absorbed in the place that you want it to be, so that these compounds get into your bloodstream in a predictable and reliable way. The other amazing thing about, I think, the nano emulsification is the dosing. Because of the onset time is much quicker, you can actually step up your dose in a much more controlled way. So if you are not getting the relief you need, you can take another gummy or have another nano emulsified tincture. But if you're on a traditional gummy, you have about an hour, if at best, if you time it with your food, to make that decision. And sometimes if you take too much, you might regret it.
I do think that that is one of the best things about nanotechnology in general, is that when you're talking to a patient, it is, at least for me personally, it is all about predictable, repeatable outcomes. And so I don't want to take a gummy because I'm stressed out going to go talk to my parent-teacher conference because my kid's screwing up at school and I need to like take a breath before I go in there, kind of thing. I need my gummy to kick in before I walk into that meeting, so I'm calm, I'm relaxed. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. Like, let's go tackle the day. I don't need it to kick in mid parent-teacher conference where I'm like, oh shit, I'm high right now. And I need to be, right? Like, regular gummies, they're very much a crapshoot, whereas nano, it is predictable, it is repeatable, it is, I don't want to be like it's the gold standard, but I kind of feel like in a therapeutic medical setting, it is kind of the gold standard when we're talking about repeatable outcomes.
You're taking the words out of our mouths, because that's kind of what we're going around the world saying, trying to tell people right now, is that and that's why we're on this side of the planet, because you guys are really looking for intentful cannabinoid therapies, and I think that nanoemulsification is, as you're saying, the best vehicle we have to deliver these compounds. And, we've talked about effects with these other consumption methods. I think the effects with nano is another unique experience because it's not the same as the other two. And, we just clearly from the chemistry, we can understand that that's probably a result of we are not normally consuming these raw cannabinoids that are expressed in the plant unadulterated. And when you get the chance to consume them through a nano emulsion, those compounds are going right into your bloodstream. So what I find is that it's a much cleaner is maybe a word you could use, or clear experience. I definitely don't lose my energy. And more than that, it's kind of like a mood booster. And I don't necessarily, of course, this goes with the level of dose in all these in all of these consumption methods. The level of dosing can drastically change our feedback, I think. But with the nano, if you're kind of in that micro dose or therapeutic dose range, for me and what I'm looking for, I'm able to have a very clear, no brain fog experience, and that's really unique because I can get that from some flower. But again, if I left it out or it's not stored properly, that flower could be totally different. And that can mess my day up.
Alec, I think you said something that how I describe it a lot to a lot of people is that it's a clean experience. It's a clean up. It is a beautiful plateau and an easy down. It is not a funky hangover the next day. I feel like, and maybe it is because nothing is being converted, maybe because it is more of a raw, real experience. So on some level, it is more like flour in that sense that, again, you absorb it, you have your experience with it, and it just very gently leaves you.
Yeah. And I think this is more our bro science right now. We haven't turned it to real science, but it goes back to that oxidation concept. These nano clouds, you can call them, that are basically forming around these cannabinoids. They're protecting the cannabinoids from getting hit with oxygen molecules. So just directly by being in a nano emulsification, those cannabinoids are not experiencing the level of oxidation that they might otherwise be experiencing in a product. So I think that's my hypothesis, that these oxidized cannabinoids, the lack of them might be what's leading to that clearer experience. But
talking about shelf life too, right?
Yeah. So shelf life, I think that the nano emulsification that we're working with folks on now lasts, I think, about 3 years. We haven't done a 3-year stability study, but we've done accelerated stability studies, and it's really incredible. But it's interesting because with our tincture, if most people would think, oh, I got to store it cold to keep it well, which is great with your cannabis. If you got cannabis flower, you want to store it in a cool, dark place, and that will keep it really nice, hopefully vacuum sealed. But with these emulsifications, you have to, there are some nuances with how, they might need to transport and stay at room temperature, which is not actually a bad thing. Room temperature is a very average scenario, but if you were to, put it in your fridge, you could cause the cannabinoids to kind of condensate out. And that's kind of the analogy I've been using for that is thinking of, the vapor pressure and, our air outside, as if you have a level of humidity and the temperature comes down, that starts to condense out of the air. And because the air has less molecular activity to basically create space for these bubbles to exist.
Yeah.
I feel like my mind just pulled up.
He's seriously professor.
You saw me just try to process that. I was like, okay, wait, hold on, Colin, give me the science on that, because I was following it.
I mean, that's at least what we've been told is that these things are not as stable at low temperature, which does make sense based on what Alec was saying. I mean, it makes sense. So yeah, I think it's a gift, right? It's a gift from the heavens.
Room temperature works.
Yeah, exactly. It barely works that way. I mean,
You can definitely keep it in your pocket.
Pocket full of sunshine.
That's right.
I
Pocket
love
full
it.
of happiness.
I love it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of your whirlwind Australian tour to sit down with me here in Brisbane to have a chit chat. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Before I let you go, though, where can people follow your work and keep up with this tour you're on and what you're up to?
Honestly, we're a little bit in stealth mode. I would say this is our first forte. Yeah, this is the first forte.
Watch this space, people.
Basically the code name for our project is Helix, and we're going to be trying to bring this ecosystem to everyone really soon. And we're working with some great folks here that we don't want to spill the beans on yet, but there's some really amazing opportunities both here in the EU that we're excited to taste.
I want your secret safe with me and my listeners.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's about time we have these conversations, and I just want to thank you for having us, because it's amazing to be a part of what the work that really needs to be done. Without voices like yourself, I don't know where people would find their education, and that's really it's an amazing thing that you're here, but it's also a sad thing. And I appreciate you fighting that fight, because it's going to take a village for all of this stuff to come out how we know it should come out.
I appreciate that, Alec.
Yeah, Alec's always so well spoken. I agree 100% with Alec. I mean, no, it was great. No, I really enjoyed talking to you. Really, really good what you're doing, and I hope. Well, we're in sort of stealth mode, which I think is a good thing. Usually we do stuff really quickly and kind of screw it up. But in this case, Alec and I have been kind of slow and plodding, and it's nice to look back at our progress, but we haven't told the world yet exactly what we're up to. So
look, there's nothing wrong with being the tortoise, because we all know how it worked out for the hare.
Yeah, we're seeing it play out right now. We're a lot.
That's what I'm saying. There's no shame in being the tortoise, gentlemen. No shame.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for my conversation with Colin and Alec. If there's one thing this episode really highlights, it's just how much of the cannabis experience is still misunderstood, or at the very least, oversimplified. We often talk about products as if they're consistent, predictable, and clearly defined. But the reality is, once you start looking at it a little closer, at metabolism, at delivery methods, and how compounds are actually processed in the body, it becomes very clear that two people can take the same product and have a completely different experience. And that's not a flaw in the system, that's the system. For me, what stands out most is the gap between what patients are told to expect and what actually happens in practice, especially when it comes to things like oils and edibles, where onset, intensity, and duration can vary so wildly. And that's where this conversation around delivery systems, and particularly nanotechnology, starts to become really important. It's not a silver bullet, but as a step towards something patients have been asking for from the beginning: consistency, predictability, and a bit more control over their experience. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about products. It's about people trying to navigate their health with tools that don't always behave the way they're supposed to. As always, this space is evolving, and conversations like this are part of the process, pulling things apart, questioning assumptions, and slowly building a clearer picture of what good care could actually look like. If this episode resonated with you, or you know someone who's trying to make sense of their own cannabis journey, feel free to share it. It genuinely helps more people access better information. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, not everyone who sits at your table eats with you. Some eat off you. And the only way to tell the difference is to stop serving.